I moved here 3 weeks ago. A one-room apartment on the 6th floor of an old brick building had seemed like the perfect choice. Affordable, quiet, tucked into a neighborhood where life moved at its own unhurried pace. The kind of place where people nod politely on the stairs, but no one pries too much. The building has its quirks. The stairwell smells faintly of dust and iron, like a cellar that never quite dries. The paint on the banister flakes if you grip it too tightly. And the elevator? It works only when it feels like cooperating. At night, the pipes clank and groan, as if something is dragging through them. I told myself these were the harmless sounds of age. From my windows, I see a narrow courtyard. In the evenings, it feels like a closed pocket of air, cut off from the rest of the city. The trees move, even when the wind is still, branches scratching lightly against each other, as if whispering. Every so often, a sound carries up from below, footsteps on the wet pavement, slow, deliberate. Too loud for how empty the yard usually is. Working from home means long hours of solitude. At first I enjoyed it. No traffic, no interruptions, just me and the steady rhythm of my own schedule. But quiet has a way of shifting after nightfall. Silence grows heavy, as though the building is listening. Shadows seem to pause just beyond the corners of your vision. I told myself this was what I wanted, a retreat, a place to focus, a place where nothing unexpected could happen. But already, something in me was uneasy. The first few nights passed without incident. I kept busy, setting up my desk, arranging books on the shelves, trying to make the place feel mine. The courtyard across the way was unremarkable, another old brick building, its facade marked by time, peeling paint on balconies, rust stains streaking the walls, identical rows of windows. At first, I barely noticed it. Then, on the third night, I was in my kitchen with a mug of tea. My gaze drifted, the way it does when you're half lost in thought. That's when I saw him. In one of the windows opposite, directly across from me, a man. He was standing very still, framed by the weak glow of a yellow lamp behind him. From that distance, I couldn't make out his features, only a dark silhouette. He didn't move, didn't shift his weight, didn't fidget the way people usually do when they're at a window. He just stood there. I told myself it was nothing, just a neighbor looking out the way I was. Maybe he was daydreaming. Maybe we had simply caught each other's eyes by chance. But the next evening, at almost the exact same time, he was there again, and the next. Always the same posture, always that dim light behind him, painting his outline in shadow. At first, I forced myself to believe he wasn't looking at me, just staring through me, past me, into nothing. But the longer I watched, the harder it was to deny. His body wasn't angled toward the courtyard. It wasn't toward the street. It was angled toward me. By the fifth night, I couldn't stand it. I went to the window, set my mug down, and stared straight back. If he wanted to look, fine, I'd look too. A minute passed. 2, 3. He didn't blink, didn't shift his weight. So I lifted my hand and waved, half in defiance, half in mockery of my own nerves. And then he moved. Slowly, almost lazily, he raised his arm and returned the gesture. The motion was precise, deliberate, not the distracted wave of someone acknowledging coincidence. It was intentional. A chill ran through me. I dropped my hand. My throat was dry. I pulled the curtain shut and stood there, listening to the blood rush in my ears. For the rest of the night, every time I moved through the apartment, I could feel the weight of that window behind the curtain. And I knew, without looking, he was still standing there. By the 6th night, I hadn't slept properly in 2 days. Every creak in the walls made me flinch. Every shadow in the room stretched too long, too thin. I needed an answer, logic, something to prove I wasn't slowly unraveling in a new apartment where the silence itself felt like a trap. So, that afternoon, I knocked on my downstairs neighbor's door, Mrs. K, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes, the kind who knew everything about everyone in the building. If anyone could explain the man in the window, it would be her. When I described the apartment across the street, her face tightened. "That one?" she asked slowly. "No one lives there. Not for years. The owner died. No heirs." I laughed, too quickly. The sound brittle, even to my own ears. No, someone's there. I see him almost every night, right at the window." Mrs. K shook her head firm. "Impossible. There's no power in that flat. The meter's sealed. Always has been." Her certainty hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to argue, but something in the way she was watching me made the words dissolve. Suspicion and pity. "You should rest," she said, finally, softer now. "These old buildings, they make strange sounds. You'll start seeing things if you're not careful." I thanked her and left, but her words only deepened the sickness in my stomach, because when night fell and the street lamps hummed awake outside, I couldn't help myself. I went to the window, slowly, carefully, and there he was. Only it was worse. Closer to the glass now, his face no longer a silhouette, but blurred in that sickly lamp glow, pale, expressionless. His eyes, dark holes I couldn't read, but that pulled, not staring through me, staring into me. And the room behind him, empty, bare walls, no curtains, no furniture, no lamp, only him. Yet his body was lit, as if by some unseen bulb. My knees nearly buckled. I yanked the curtain closed and pressed both palms against it, heart hammering in my throat. I wanted to scream, to run down the stairs, to pound on doors, to tell someone, anyone. But I couldn't move, because on the other side of that curtain, only a few meters away, I knew he was still there, waiting. And the worst part? I realized I had never, not once, seen him blink. The next 2 nights, I kept the curtains shut. I told myself I wouldn't look. But the thing is, when you know something is there, just beyond a thin layer of fabric, it becomes worse not to look. Every sound becomes a taunt, every silence a dare. On the 3rd night, I gave in. I lifted the corner of the curtain just enough to peek. The window opposite was dark, empty. For the first time in weeks, there was nothing. Relief washed over me, shaky, fragile, but real. Maybe Mrs. K was right. Maybe exhaustion had twisted shadows into a man. Maybe a soft pause, almost a whisper. A soft sound behind me, like a tap on shoulder. I froze, my hand still clutching the curtain's edge. It came again. A faint knock, not from the door, not from above or below, from the glass. I turned slowly, and there he was. Not across the street, not framed in a faraway window, but outside mine. Pressed against the glass, his pale face inches from the pane. Those hollow eyes locked on me. No breath fogged the glass. His hand lifted, and the sound I'd heard came again. Knock, knock, knock. I crunched my throat. Every instinct screamed run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I could only stand there, shaking, watching his fingertips drag slowly down the glass, leaving nothing behind. Then he smiled. Not wide, not grotesque, just a small curl at the corner of his mouth, as if to say, "Now you understand." I stumbled backward, knocking the mug from the counter. It shattered across the tiles. The sound snapped me free, and I bolted for the bedroom, slammed the door, and didn't come out until morning. When daylight finally forced its way through the blinds, I crept back to the kitchen. The window was clear. No marks, no trace. But as I stood there, I noticed something that made my stomach turn to ice. On the inside of the glass, faint, smeared at chest height, was the impression of a hand, too large to be mine. For 2 nights after he pressed his hand against my window, I didn't dare look outside. I kept the curtains drawn, lights dimmed, every movement calculated to avoid even the slightest glimpse of glass. But hiding only made it worse, because then I began to hear things. At first, small, a floorboard creaking in the kitchen, though I knew I hadn't stepped there. The faint scrape of something brushing against my door. Then, silence. Once, while working at my desk, I heard it, soft, unmistakable, breathing, not mine. Slow, steady, as if someone was standing just behind me. Each time I spun around, empty. The apartment was always empty. I told myself I was tired, anxious, imagining things. But then, the objects began to move. My mug, always left on the counter, appeared one morning on the table near the window. A book I'd left shut was open, spine cracked, as if someone had been reading, and my chair turned ever so slightly, facing the glass. On the 4th night, I woke to the smell of damp. Not the faint mustiness of an old building. No, heavy, like wet earth, like something freshly dug. It filled the apartment, thick, suffocating. I followed it to the kitchen and froze. The curtain was open. I was certain I had closed it before bed. Certain. But now the fabric hung loose, swaying slightly, and the window was unlocked. My pulse hammered in my throat as I pushed it shut. That's when I saw it. On the inside sill, faint but clear, was the outline of a wet handprint. Not outside, inside. I didn't sleep again. I sat in the chair, lights on, staring at the door, waiting for morning. And as the hours dragged past, one thought pressed heavier, harder to ignore. He wasn't outside anymore. He was already in here. I lasted one more night. The handprint on the window had shaken me, but denial is powerful. I told myself maybe I'd left it open. Maybe rain carried the mark inside. Maybe, but deep down, I knew better. It was past midnight when I finally shut the laptop, killed the lights. I tried to sleep, tossing, turning, but the silence pressed too hard against my ears, too still, too heavy. And then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong, a soft, dragging shuffle inside my apartment. My body went rigid. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, one step at a time, across the wooden floor. I thought about sitting up, about running, but my muscles wouldn't obey. The air itself felt heavy, pinning me down. And then the mattress dipped. Not much, just the faintest weight settling beside me. I felt it through the sheets, the shift, the pressure, and with it came the smell. That smell. Damp earth, rotting leaves, the stink of something long buried. My throat locked. I wanted to scream. Nothing came. Slowly, carefully, I forced my eyes open. The room was dark, but the streetlight's glow leaked thinly through the blinds, enough to see him, sitting on the edge of my bed, closer than ever, his head tilted, watching me, studying me, just like he had through the glass. And then he leaned in. I couldn't make out his face, only the hollow suggestion of it, the way shadows clung too tightly where his eyes should be. But I felt it, his breath on my cheek, cold, damp, like air pulled from the bottom of a well. And then he whispered, just one word. I don't know if it was my name or something else, but it crawled into my ear, sank into my chest, and stayed there like it belonged inside me. I shut my eyes, clenched them tight, willing myself to wake, to make it vanish. When I opened them, the bed was empty. Only the smell remained, and the sheets, still indented, as if someone had only just risen. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The sound of breathing at the window went on for what felt like hours. Slow, patient, as though he had all the time in the world. When dawn finally came, I gathered what little strength I had left. I told myself I would leave. I didn't care where. A hotel, a friend's couch, anywhere but here. But when I pulled the curtain aside to check, the courtyard was empty. The glass was clean. No fog, no trace of breath. I almost laughed. Maybe I had lost my mind. Maybe none of it had been real. Maybe, and then I saw it. On the inside of the glass, faint but unmistakable, a handprint. 5 long fingers pressed flat against the pane. From the inside, I dropped the curtain, backed away, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might tear straight through my chest. That was 3 days ago. I never left. I haven't gone outside, haven't opened the window, haven't let the sunlight in, but I can feel him here, somewhere in the room, watching, waiting. And at night, when I finally close my eyes, the mattress dips again. This time, I don't move because I know he's already too close.